There's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hello BookTube, Happy New Year! I'm Sean Breeze Books, welcome back to my channel and my first Friday reads of 2025. Did I say Friday reads? It's probably going up Saturday. In fact, I'm 90% sure it's going to be a Saturday reads, but I'm filming it at noon on Friday. The reason that it's going up late is I have not finished editing my besties and worsties of 2024, and I need that to go up first, absolutely. It'll be so outdated if it doesn't go up until Saturday. So it'll be a Saturday reads for that reason. But that kind of throws a monkey wrench in the plans I had for the weekend, because I'm finally going for my flu shot and COVID shot, because I wanted to put it off until I got all my New Year's videos and interviews and this and that done, because lately the shots I get tend to really knock me flat for a couple days. So I will be possibly editing this while I'm knocked flat, but so be it. So yes, Happy New Year. I've had a great week. I think it was last Saturday, but I can't remember. It doesn't matter. Mum, Sharon Batalla, and I went to see A Complete Unknown, the Bob Dylan movie starring Timothée Chalamet, and we loved it. Sharon had a more complicated reaction, but she loved it too, and Mum and I didn't have any complications in our delight in this movie. So I'm a big Timothée Chalamet fan, and I hope he gets all the awards this year. I've had a kind of a love-hate relationship with Dylan over the years, until I was, goodness, almost 40. I couldn't stand his voice, so I never really cared about his music. And then finally, I don't know what happened. I think I saw a documentary. I think that documentary was done by one of the famous Scorsese or something, No Direction Home, and somehow just learning more about his life got me to hear past his voice, and to appreciate his voice, at least in certain eras. He loses me by about before 1970 sometime, and I do prefer the earlier stuff, but I don't cut it off when he made the big jump from folk to rock. I love some of those early rock songs as well, and he's a very enigmatic, prickly, powerful force in American culture. It was one of the Nobel Awards for Literature that I was most approving of, and now I've kind of back into listening to his music since seeing the movie last weekend. It was fascinating to go with Sharon Batalla. That was incredible. So that's my main artsy-fartsy news. And my new computer arrived a few days ago this week. The week between Christmas and New Year's is like, what day was it? I don't know. But it arrived maybe 3 or 4 days ago, and I'm very happy with it. I'm using it to edit my videos. The reason I'm not filming this Friday reads on it is because, as per any desktop computer I've ever had, the built-in webcam is terrible. It's not terrible. It's of not good enough quality. Plus, it has such a wide angle on it that you can see my entire library, everything, and I very purposely and strategically position this camera on my iPad so that you can't see the just ridiculous hoarder-style mess of boxes and papers and stuff over there. So I've ordered a 4K external webcam, should be arriving this weekend, and I'm hoping that will do the trick and that I can zoom in. But if not, I'll just have to keep this library a lot cleaner, not just this small portion of the room. But I'm overall, there's a few little bugs with the computer, but I have I think a 3-year warranty on it, so I'll be able to get those ironed out. But for the most part, I'm absolutely delighted with my new computer. So, all right, without further ado, let's meet my first mystery guest of 2025. And this week's mystery guest is the Canadian writer Andrew Bowden, who is joining us from Burnaby, British Columbia, and he had his debut novel come out in September 2024, When We Were Ashes. Welcome, Andrew.
Thank you so much for having me, Sean, and thank you to your viewers. That's great.
It's great to meet you. We can't get started without me asking about this fabulous room you are sitting in. Tell us about it. Oh, my goodness.
This is my writing inner sanctum, and this is where I do all my creative work and try and avoid my day job.
That's wonderful. What is the color of the paint? Do you remember the exact name?
I do. The color, believe it or not, is called Mega Blue.
Mega blue.
Mega Blue. I don't think you can get bluer than that.
No, it's really blue, and I absolutely love it. It just makes the art jump off the walls. And I think
Yeah,
you have a
thank you.
personal connection to one of the artists on display there. Tell us
Yeah,
about.
I do. So if you look over my shoulder here, you look what looks like a pair of legs on in high heels. And that's by an artist that I grew up with in my hometown of Cranbrook, British Columbia. His name originally was Patrick Kemball. In the 60s, as perhaps many people did, he had a series of visionary experiences. So he dropped out of engineering school, took up art, and painted the rest of his life. And one of the changes that occurred for him was his name. So he went from being Patrick Kemball to Man Woman. So if you can picture my small hometown, Cranbrook, blue collar hockey town, and I just had the privilege of growing up as a friend of our family, man, woman, this brilliant, creative man.
Just incredible. And I thought, oh, that artist's name will be impossible to Google. But when I typed in man, woman, artist, his stuff came right up. So just incredible. Is that a poster for something?
That is a poster for one of his art shows that was in the 70s. So he did all his own silk screening, the poster being one of them. One of the great things I got to learn as a kid in his art studio was how to do silk screening. So me and my brothers would go down to his art studio and he would show us how to silk screen. It was great.
It's amazing. Your novel sounds amazing. Tell us about the opening premise for When We Were Ashes.
I'll give you a little background, and it's not about an easy subject. There's no real way around it. It's about one of the darkest periods in the history of Nazi Germany. The regime at the time, so think 1938, 1939, began this awful program called Aktion T4, so Aktion T4. And the program, believe it or not, was designed to persecute people with disabilities. And an estimated 300,000 people died. My novel follows a group, children with disabilities, victims of this program, and follows their time not only in a fictitious hospital I made up called Trutzburg, but also then jumps ahead a bit in time and follows some of the survivors of this program.
What got you into writing this kind of a story? I know that you have written some nonfiction about disability topics.
That's right. So an earlier work I co-edited with my friend and a writer herself, Lenore Roundtree. It was a collection of personal essays on the subject of authors with mental illness or authors who have family members with mental illness. That book was called Hidden Lives, coming out on mental illness. This particular novel, it really began about 10 years ago. I read a book at the time called The Third Reich at War by Richard J. Evans. Just because I was particularly interested in the history, I'd read a review of the book in Harper's Magazine, showed what a powerful piece of writing it was. And within the book, there was about 2 pages on the Aktion T4 program. I confess I hadn't heard of it. Of course, I knew about the terrors of the Holocaust, but not this aspect of it. And in particular, what grabbed my attention was there was a picture of a gray bus. So picture gray metallic bus, windows are blacked out. And this bus, Richard J. Evans described as going around to hospitals and so on and collecting children with disabilities to bring them to so-called euthanasia centers. So that was about 2014, 2015. I remember being horrified by it. I wrote about it in my journal, and then I promptly tried to forget about it. Fast forward to 2019, I was just finishing up another piece of writing, a collection of short stories, And I was sitting at this very desk in this very room, wondering what to write next. And I asked myself that out loud, and an image of the gray bus flashed into my mind. And right there and then, I just said, okay, that's what I'll write about. What followed was a period of about 6 months of research, various monographs, online research at the Holocaust Center, and then the development of my characters, and then the slow falling in love with my characters as they began to emerge for me.
Tell us about one or two of the main characters.
So one of the main characters is a 13-year-old boy named Rainer, and Rainer, to all appearances, looks very disabled, and he is left behind at a sanitarium by his wealthy father, who Rainer believes is ashamed of him. We learn a little different later, but I won't spoil that aspect of the book. So 13-year-old Rainer is in a hospital in Stuttgart. He has an older friend, a girl by the name of Emmy. Emmy is about 15 or 16, and Rainer, of course, adores her. And the two are not only friends, but Rainer is slowly developing love for her, romantic love. Then, of course, they're moved to one of these euthanasia centers, and it becomes darker. One of the other characters that I really enjoyed writing about is the bus driver. So the bus driver of this gray bus, his name is Peter Berger. He would, what we would call a World War I veteran fighting for Germany on the Eastern Front. And then through life accidents and so on, and the extra money that the regime pays him for driving the bus, he drives the bus. And he's very much a conflicted man. He realizes, of course, what he's doing. He has a family at home, he has children, but he's doing this awful thing.
There is a novella on my shelf that I haven't read yet, and I wonder if you have, because it's on the exact same topic. It's called The Bus by Adam Pottle. Are you familiar with this?
I am not familiar with it, but
he's a Saskatoon writer, and he writes about the social and philosophical aspects of disability and deafness. He is a deaf writer, and this is about the bus that you're talking about. And I'm looking forward, is that the right word? But I really want to read this, and it sounds like there'd be a lot of resonance between the two.
I am going to take note of that and definitely read it. Unfortunately, it's fascinating and gruesome and sad and terrible all at once, but it is part of our unfortunate history.
I think I understand why you took on this writing project, this fictional project. What was it like, the actual writing of it, in terms of how dark a topic it was? How did you manage?
How did I manage? That's a good question. It's a little strange to talk about because when I was writing it, I usually immerse myself in the research. For whatever reason, I had some emotional distance at that time. And then I wrote the manuscript very fast, in about the first draft in about 6 months. And sometimes it felt like you're in some sort of dissociated state or something like that. It was only maybe 2 years later, when I'm working with my editor at Goose Lane on just close edits and so on, that it hit me what I'd written. And there were just moments of just utter sadness I felt for my characters and what they went through. It wasn't all darkness. This is not a novel of just darkness. I really tried to include a lot of moments of beauty and humanity. And one of the motifs that runs through the book is music, and how much music affects the children. In particular, Eric Satie's piece, the Gymnopédies, which is, the opening of the novel. There's just Rainer interacting with a character who plays this for the children, and then it is a motif running through the novel.
Wow.
And then, of course, the children don't know what's happening to them. And while this is all this awfulness is going on, Raynor is falling in love with Emmy, and the moments of beauty and heartache and love he has for her come out in some very literal magical moments. Let's just say that.
I think perhaps the title can be interpreted rather obviously, but is there anything you'd like to say about the title? It's really beautiful, When We Were Ashes.
So yeah, it can be interpreted very literally. However, there is a moment in the story where one of the young girls says words like that. She's talking about this very music of Eric Satie's, and she refers to it, I think, as the beautiful sad. And then there is mention of ashes and so on. So the title for me, while it can be interpreted very literally, is also about a kind of overcoming. Of course, it's in the past when we were ashes,
Well,
but we're
it
something
absolutely,
different now,
yes.
and we
There
got
is
through it.
something afterwards.
Yeah,
Now, you mentioned that you had finished a collection of short stories. So is that out there somewhere in print?
it is. It's called The Secret History of My Hometown. And these are stories set in my hometown of Cranbrook, BC. And I decided I mean, the conceit is I decided to rewrite the history of my hometown. Sometimes in Canada, I think we always feel a little inferior to, say, the US and its history, for example. It's maybe, the difference between the CFL and the NFL in history and literature. So I decided to punch up the history of my hometown. So we have all sorts of famous people participating in that history. Leon Trotsky, for example, Ernest Hemingway. Um,
Never knew.
they all appear. They all appear.
That's
And
wonderful.
so it goes from the birth of my hometown in the late 19th century to what I call its purported end in the 80s during the height of the Cold War.
Wow.
And it is much lighter, zanier fare than my novel here.
And what are you working on now, Andrew?
As my friend and mentor, Juji Gardner, says, she said, you have such range. So I've gone from Secret History of My Hometown to When We Were Ashes, and now I'm working on a novel here set on the West Coast in the 18th century during the height of Russian, British, and Spanish exploration on the coast around what was called the Nootka crisis. So the Nootka are an indigenous people on the coast. And of course, they were subject to the colonial explorations of the British and the Spanish at the time. There was a battle and so on. So while I don't focus so much on that exact historical event, it is around those set of circumstances that the novel explores.
You do have quite a range, it would seem. I think you have a couple books to tell us about that you'd like to recommend.
I do, and I don't know if you or your viewers know about the New York Review of Books in the US, and they have a publishing house as well.
Yes.
And so I have a couple of volumes from them.
Great.
And the first one, I hope you can see it,
Yes.
is Kolyma Stories by Varlam Shalamov. And so Varlam Shalamov, he lived 1907 to 1982. He was a journalist, early 20th century in the Soviet Union. At the time, of course, Stalin has come to power and is ruling in the awful way he did. And Shalamov unfortunately gets on the wrong side of the regime as a journalist and as a journalist supporting Leon Trotsky. Shalamov is arrested a few times, first time on or around 1929. He's in a labor camp for 3 years and then released. He doesn't stop his journalistic ways, which of course continue to offend the regime, and he's arrested again. And he's sentenced to Kolyma prison, which is in the far northeast of the Soviet Union. So picture almost on the Arctic Circle, tundra, very cold. And he is sentenced to hard labor, mining gold and coal. And this collection of stories, it's a weighty tome. It's about 700 pages.
Wow.
And there was another critic who described him as an anatomist of the Soviet Gulag. And it is just a fascinating, powerful collection. And while he calls them stories, many of them read like short biographical pieces. And again, it's not all darkness. He, with pinpoint accuracy, dissects the politics of the camps, the relationships with the guards, the relationships with interrogators, and everything in between. And it's such a brilliant tale of survival and struggle with life and death and just persevering. Amazingly, Shalamov is one of perhaps the few that do persevere. And he's released in 1951 after 15 years in the Gulag. And he begins writing this volume, these Kolyma stories, and then a later volume, which I also have called Sketches of the Criminal World. Fascinating.
Yeah, I was vaguely aware of this book. Now I know a lot more, and it sounds all the more interesting.
It's really sorry, it's
No,
it's
go ahead.
really, I think, one to read along Solzhenitsyn, if that is of interest, as it is to me.
This is the joke, so I'll edit it out if it doesn't land. But do you do any light reading ever, Andrew?
Believe it or not, I do. I absolutely do.
The reason I think that's so funny is because many people ask me that. So in other words, I tend to read dark, sad stuff as much as possible. So
I have such a broad range of interests and reading interests and so on, but I don't want to look away from the terrible aspects of our history. I'm not thinking of that old wise saw about if we don't know our history, we're condemned to repeat it. But I am very much interested in broadening my own context and perspective on the world and being able to set what's happening now within the broader context of history and learning from others what they may have experienced and how they handled it and how they persevered. And most importantly, how they kept their humanity through it all.
and you said you have another NYRB book to tell us about?
I do. And this one is definitely not as dark
Okay.
as the Kolyma stories. It's called The Invention of Morel
Oh,
by
yes, I've read that.
Adolfo, Bioy, Casares.
Yeah.
So Casares, 1914 to 1999. And if the Kolyma stories are a heavy tome, this is a slim novella at about 95 pages. One of those novellas that punches way above its weight. So Casares was a friend of the Argentinian writer Jorge Luis Borges, who praised it. And then also the Mexican poet Octavio Paz praised it as well. Both described it as perfect. The unfortunate thing is I don't want to talk too much about it because I could easily spoil it. So I'll just give a very general overview, which is that the narrator of the book is a fugitive, apparently from the Argentinian police. He rows out to an island called Villings Island, which he came to learn was abandoned, or at least he thinks it was abandoned. And he knew that recent visitors to the island had contracted some sort of mysterious disease. And even though knowing that, he comes there anyway, thinking it will keep the authorities away. So the island, there are a few buildings on it. There's a chapel, a swimming pool, and a museum that is more like a hotel where he takes up residence. Let me just say he's not as alone as he thinks he is. Some mysterious figures start arriving on the island, and at the risk of maybe spoiling this just a little bit, they also vanish without a trace at odd times. And this is all rather mysterious and feels a bit like the supernatural. Absolutely fascinating little novella. And if I talk any more about the plot, I fear I'm just going to give it all away. So I don't want to do that.
Well, and it sounds like you made out better than me in one sense, because I could never figure out what the heck was going on, but I still loved it. I just thought it was absolutely fascinating. And it's kind of like sci-fi in a way, and I'm not into sci-fi, but I was completely disoriented from page one till the end, and I will never forget it.
Yeah, exactly. It's hard to forget. What I love about some of the South American writers like Casares and Borges and Gabriela Garcia Marquez is that sense of magic realism, the intrusion of, in Spanish, what they call the más allá into our world, and just some of the effects it can give to their writing and their stories.
And I don't know that Spanish phrase. So does that about magical realism?
Oh, the más allá means the great beyond. The great beyond.
Just before I let you go, can you think of a writer or a book that's lighter after I made that joke?
Oh, you're hitting me in my middle-aged memory at this very moment. But one of the books I really enjoy, it's a collection of stories by the Afghan writer Idris Shah, and it's his Mullah Nasruddin tales. And it's really a collection of joke stories about the joke figure Mullah Nasruddin, and they're really designed to show our foibles, our flaws, and so on in each story through the means of a joke, through the means of a joke tale. They're very intriguing in the sense on the surface, you have this fun entertainment, but they have their depths, which freeze for a moment our own thought processes and maybe give us a fleeting glimpse of them.
Very interesting. Well, I have to say you are absolutely fascinating, and it's not just the fabulous backdrop. I've really enjoyed our conversation. I'm looking forward to getting into When We Were Ashes and having you back for a deeper dive type of chat. But thank you very much for telling us all about it today.
You're very welcome, and thank you so much for the gift of your time.
What an interesting man, and what a fascinating, disturbing novel When We Were Ashes sounds like. Oh my goodness. I loved talking with Andrew Bowden. And let's see, what have I got for you? Well, I've been busier than usual. I'm ready for a holiday, just coming off of a holiday. Although my lessons that I still teach on Zoom to my Japanese students, I'm off. Their New Year's holiday is still ongoing, so I'm basically off until next Monday. I've got a few more days, but I'll need them to recover from the week I've had on BookTube. Yes, I've put up a book haul video that I had filmed a lot earlier, but it went up on the 30th on New Year's Day. Instead of the 2025 releases, that was going to be too large of a project. I just put up a video that's 18 minutes long of my winter 2025 most anticipated releases, and then by the time you see this video, so Friday evening probably, my besties and worsties will be going up. So that was a lot. I had loved doing it, but I'm tired. So please, I hope you enjoyed it. I sure did. And I've also had quite a reading week. The tail end of the December and the first few days of January, I finished 2 books, I think. Yes, I have. I have finished Fingersmith by Sarah Waters, and I'm not going to say very much about it here because I have a a full-length chat that won't actually be coming until maybe February, because my interlocutor and I, my pseudo-buddy reader and I, I'm keeping their identity a secret for no particular reason, we're also going to watch, well, promoted here. So we actually paid money to sign up for a Women's Prize live chat, January 28th at 7:30, that would be UK time. Simon Savage in conversation with Sarah Waters about Fingersmith. So we're going to watch it and do a quick little addendum to the video that the Zoom chat we already had last week about Fingersmith. So that's all I'll say. It was a 5-star read. I was kind of dared to read it because I had tried, I think it was The Little Stranger, and bailed on it, didn't like it, and I was convinced to give this one a try, and I'm really glad that I was persuaded because I loved it. It's very plotty, it's very neo-Victorian, and the audiobook was tremendous as well. More later. And just last night, I finished Christ on a Bike by Orla Owen. Orla was my mystery guest. I'll put a link to that chat in the show notes. And I think we're going to have a longer chat about the novel. I hope so. I haven't contacted her yet to tell her I'm finished. I didn't love this novel, but I really enjoyed it and thought it was well done. I was engaged, never bored, never felt the pacing was off. From start to finish, I hated the not quite main character, but almost the main character, the protagonist's sister. You've seen me rant on that in a previous Friday reads and in yesterday's Besties and Worsties. And that did decrease my enjoyment of the book somewhat. I also, if to talk about things that I didn't love, the premise is a bit far-fetched. And the issues that were explored, I thought were explored in a serious way. It was very provocative, made me think a lot about money and envy and sibling rivalry, sibling relationships, grief. There's a lot of really important stuff in here, and I felt that the kind of wacky premise of this inheritance and the mysteriousness of where this money was coming from, that the protagonist just kind of landed in her lap and then they were involved in her lives. There was an artifice about that just knocked it down to a 4-star read for me. So with qualifications, I recommend it, and I think it would just be an amazing book for a book club. There would be probably lots of arguing about this book, and I can't wait to read more by Orla Owen. So overall, a great success. I think you should do a Kindle preview and read some more reviews, watch my chat with Orla, and maybe we're going to have a longer one, I hope so, to decide whether it's for you. I don't think it's for everybody. And it wasn't completely for me, but it was mostly for me. What a interesting, fascinating novel. That's what I have finished. I have started 3. The third one, Lucky Boy by Shanthi Sekaran. Maybe I'm not quite ready to do a preliminary check-in, so I'll do that next week. But I will check in on Other People's Secrets by Meredith Hambrock, which I started, and I'm doing this as an audio-text combo. The audio is great, and the writing is so good that, while I have the time, and I've had kind of more free time to just sit with the book open while listening. Sometimes when life gets busy, I'm more liable to listen while walking or doing the dishes or something. But I'm really enjoying this. I love the way it started. It's actually more of a Sean book than I would have anticipated, because it's the publisher promoted it as a mystery, I think, and of course you know how I feel about that. But I knew Meredith said that was just a publishing decision and that she didn't think it was a mystery. There is some kind of a mysterious element to it, but I've read 3 chapters. Meredith Hambrock is a Saskatoon writer. She didn't always live here, but she's lived here for a couple of years now, and I know her, and I really, really like her. And so I'm so glad to finally be doing this. I'll tell you the reason. I don't need to keep everything a secret. The reason I'm starting this at the beginning of the year is I want to finish it, hopefully in January, and interview Meredith about it, because her second novel is coming out in the spring, and I've already got an electronic arc of that, and I want to have it read and my interview with Meredith about her second novel, which is called She's a Lamb. I want to have my interview ready to go live on the pub date. So that's why the timing is set the way it is. So the protagonist, her name is Baby. She was a dumpster baby. Her mother abandoned her, and she was found and adopted by a woman who, at the opening of the novel, has just died. This is set in a crumbling lakeside resort town, and the man that she has a situationship, is that the new word? Like, it's not really a boyfriend-girlfriend relationship. She really wants it to be, and I'm already drawn into the emotional dynamics of that. It's described so lushly. It's like, oh, you need to stand up for yourself and get what you want, girl. Invested is what I'm trying to say. I'm invested in the story. And baby, she's, I think she's not that young. I think she's maybe in her 30s. And she works in the local saloon, drinks too much, and is a lovely, lovely person. So, yeah, other people's secrets is starting out great. Thank God, because I really like Meredith and have already made arrangements to interview her about it. My smiles and chuckles are very genuine. I'm just delighted by it so far. The other one that I'm delighted by, I'm so excited too that I'm as delighted by it as I am, is the queer Scottish debut novel or novella, The Old Haunts by Allan Radcliffe. And Allan was a mystery guest. I'll link to that. And I've had a feeling ever since of somebody, I can't remember if I'm still not supposed to keep who recommended it to me a secret. I think I am. So the person who recommended it to me said, this is such a Sean book, I know you're going to love it. And they were right. I am almost 60 pages into the 160-page novel. Our protagonist is Jamie, and he is bereaved because he's I don't know if he's 40 or 35. He's lost both of his elderly parents in the last year. And the mother's funeral, he and his boyfriend have just come from that funeral, and they're going to a steading. It's a former farm that's been adapted for, it can be adapted for many different things, but in this case, it's kind of like a vacation spot. They're renting out the house. And so he and his boyfriend Alex, they're staying there. They've come directly from the funeral, and they're there. Jamie's reflecting a lot. Bittersweet memories of his growing up, working class in Edinburgh. There is some reason that this place is known to both Jamie, our protagonist, and his boyfriend Alex, and I haven't got all that straight in my head yet, but this is so evocative of Michael Cunningham. The writing is so poignant, and the sentences are so gorgeous. I'm really, really enjoying it. I'm reading this to Mary Jean. So that's what I've started. And I'm going to start 2 new ones this week. In fact, I've got my reading cut out for me. Vaccination side effects or no vaccination side effects. My first check-in on my first buddy read of the year with Heidi of My Reading Life is due on Monday. The Harpole Report by J.L. Carr. J.L. Carr, of course, is the author of one of my favorite works of literature, A Month in the Country. And this is a 1972 novel based on his experience as a teacher. I thought it was based on the year that he went and taught in a Midwest, like Montana or North Dakota, but it's set in England. But apparently, one review said the funniest and perhaps truest story about running a school that I've ever read. So it's set in a primary school, and George Harpole is the acting head. And I'll have more to say next week. And I've pulled this one off my on-hold shelf because I'm going to be having a Zoom chat with Dorian and James and Chris of the Book Cougars about this Edith Wharton novel, A Sun at the Front. We had to postpone it until January. I had read 24 pages. I think I'll probably reread those and continue on. Wharton's only novel dealing with the First World War, and I won't say any more than that. I'll give you a preliminary report. Well, I think I already did a preliminary report on this, but I'll tell you how it's going next week. And the Zoom chat with those lovely, kind of got a unofficial book club. We did the summer book. No, let's not even talk about the summer book. Summer, which I didn't like nearly as much as the rest of them did, and they really took me to task for it. This chat is on January 19th, so I better get started. Lots of exciting bookish things going on in my world, and I hope the same can be said for you. Thanks for watching.